Hello, welcome to yet another episode of the Halal Food Podcast. Today we have a very special guest with us, Professor Joe Regenstein. He's going to tell us a little bit about slaughter. Before we start, I'll invite Prof to introduce himself. Prof.
Hi, I'm Joe Regenstein. I'm a professor emeritus of food science at Cornell University, where I also head the Cornell Kosher and Halal Food Initiative, which is a teaching research extension program dealing with the unique problems of kosher and halal food. I also have an adjunct appointment at Kansas State University, where I teach a 2-credit asynchronous course that everybody is welcome to take in kosher and halal food regulations. And I also have a courtesy appointment at Cornell in the vet school because of the work I do with slaughter issues and animal issues related to kosher and halal. They have given me an appointment up there. And that has led to my being part of the American Veterinary Medical Association's Humane Slaughter Panel, where I've had the honor of working with Dr. Temple Grandin and other really well-versed folks in animal welfare dealing with issues around humane slaughter. And that's kind of what I'd like to talk about today. Thank you.
It's very useful, Prof, that you have done a lot in this area. In the UK and other parts of the world, halal and shikita slaughter has always been on the microscope. You get a lot of people reporting inaccurate information about halal. Sometimes the information presented can be argued or can be debated. Now, my first question to you is, in 1994, you and Professor Temple Grandin published a paper which is very well cited. You observed 3,000 formula-fed calves and who were properly restrained, who were slaughtered with a sharp knife, and who were slaughtered with by a very well-trained slaughter operative. Many people may argue that that was 1994. Up to today, have things changed? Would you change your position from the conclusions you made?
I have not reread the paper recently.
Yeah.
Being emeritus, I don't always get back to papers. Um, Overall, I think the conclusions are solid. I think where the new work that I'd like to discuss comes in is the technical definitions of what is going on. I think the behavioral observations that Temple made, and I did not do those measurements. I worked with Temple on writing it up and framing it for her in terms of the kosher and halal issues that they represent. She did the work, and it was representative of her actual observations, and those are sound. I think the big change is this question of where are those signs that people were using of loss of posture, loss of corneal reflex. What do they mean and how do we interpret them? And that, I believe, has changed essentially to the benefit of the humanity of kosher and halal slaughter. I think when one looks at the new papers that have been coming out, and I'll want to give a framework for their background, it really shows that kosher and halal are much more humane than most of the scientific community in the past has recognized.
In 2012 or 20, yeah, around 2012, Professor Temple Grandin described religious slaughter without stunning as a controversial subject, and many researchers have said, "Oh, it's not good for welfare." There are so many views about it not being good for welfare. Do you think in the future, kosher could switch or could accept stunning if that could happen, I'm not putting words into your mouth. If that could happen, what would you want to see? Because the Muslim community say it shouldn't kill the animal. If they can prove to you that it doesn't kill, would you accept it, or do you want something more than that?
Um, I don't see anywhere in the near future
Okay.
the system that's in place being replaced by stunning. There are a few rabbis at a very liberal persuasion within the Orthodox community who accept post-slaughter stunning. That has generally been strongly rejected. Uh, I don't see a change. I think the key here is that we're in good shape. And that's the other piece. If I may take a few minutes, I'll do it hopefully fairly quickly.
That's fine.
And I'm happy to go in more detail if we want to do another session, or if people, I'm working on a paper to put that in writing.
Mhm.
Basically, this is where I talked about definition. We have an animal is conscious.
Yeah.
An animal, after it's been cut,
Yeah. With or without
moves
stunning.
without stunning. I'm
Without
talking
stunning.
about without stunning. I'm talking
Yeah.
about
Yeah.
traditional kosher and halal.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
question has always been, how long does it take to go unconscious? What the new research has done is really focused on what is mostly human research on what is unconsciousness. Unconsciousness from a slaughter perspective is when the animal ceases to feel pain.
Correct.
What does that mean? That means that the cortical choroid is offline. Pain is observed in one part of the brain. And that's what's the new thinking that one has not previously had. It is not a brain function, it is a part of a very specific part of the brain. And that part of the brain happens to be a part of the brain that when blood pressure is lost, using the modern vocabulary, that part of the brain goes offline. The brain
When you
stem,
say it goes offline, what do you mean, Prof?
it means that it stops functioning.
Okay.
So
Okay.
parts of the brain, the system is designed to try to save it. So in other words, it's doing triage. It's taking certain parts of the brain and whatever little blood is coming through is trying to direct it to those parts, particularly the brain stem, which is life and death.
Yeah.
But the cerebral cortex goes offline.
Okay.
And so that means it goes offline faster than some of the so-called indicators, which are not happening in the cerebral cortex. So even the loss of posture is probably after that. So what the new work has shown also is that when you cut, and if you cut well, you get gushing blood.
Yeah.
The blood pressure to the brain, even in cattle,
Mhm.
even with the
Vertebral artery.
vessels in the back of the head,
Yeah.
the blood pressure drops very quickly.
Okay.
And that blood pressure drop correlates with loss of consciousness. And basically, you cannot maintain consciousness, that is the production of pain in the cerebral cortex, for around less than 10 seconds. So the system is going offline in 10 seconds or less in terms of the ability to process pain. So pain and suffering and all of those things are irreversibly lost long before loss of posture. So the work that earlier, and Temple's very strong feeling about loss of posture, which is one of the first things to go as external markers, is not a marker of unconsciousness. And so it is the blood pressure,
Yeah.
which again is difficult to measure. There's now new equipment that was announced for humans that actually can measure blood pressure without a cuff. So it can be just put on the surface of an animal in some
Okay.
place, but
Okay.
that needs to be developed. But the
Hmm.
point being is if you have gushing,
Yeah.
that animal's unconscious within less than 10 seconds. And
Okay.
the gushing is the sign. So if you've got the gushing, you cannot maintain blood pressure. If you cannot maintain blood pressure, you cannot maintain consciousness. You can still maintain posture. You can still maintain reflexes because they're coming from other parts of the brain.
No.
So the important thing from an animal welfare point of view is pain, and that is being stopped.
Okay. So I think what will, many researchers will be interested in this. I'm sure many researchers will listen to this and say, "Wow, we need to investigate this." What will be useful, Prof, is if we knew what volume of blood in cattle, for instance, would need to be lost before that unconsciousness is measured. Because many people will argue, Prof, is even when you cut the carotid and the jugulars, brain that is still flowing through the vertebral artery. Are you arguing that it's not enough or there's no blood flow at all?
They're all connected, and once you have, and one of the papers that I
Yeah.
was not directly involved in, did what
Mhm.
is called hemodynamics
Okay.
of the cerebral. That system is part of the total system. And when you cut all of the vessels and you have that rapid loss of blood, that loses pressure also. And therefore, there is not the flow in the back that people have always postulated, but in fact, it isn't happening. And
Okay.
so, again,
Yeah.
the point being is if, and there's also all this business of aneurysms and false aneurysms and occlusions, all of them take way too long. They affect things like loss of posture. They may affect, all the other reflexes, but by then the animal's already unconscious and does not feel pain. So all of those things are important for invasive cutting,
Yeah. Yeah.
but are
Yeah.
not important for the idea of removing the animal from a restraining box and hanging it on the line to finish the bleed out and to eventually lose all those reflexes, at which time we can do invasive cutting. But the unconsciousness, the animal welfare issue is already taken care of within the first 10 seconds.
I need to post this as a separate part because that is very interesting, and I'm sure many people will be interested in it. Because we've always believed that when you do the cutting, and look, I am a Muslim, and I've always said I do believe animals do feel pain. So if you have that evidence to say it is possible that animals will not feel pain because of the dynamics of the brain and the loss of blood pressure, I'm sure many people would love to investigate this. So I'm gonna
Right. I
post it
mean,
as a separate.
remember, that's where I made the point earlier, again, the cutting is still the conscious animal. There's no question when you're cutting, the animal
Okay,
sounds it.
okay. So for a
That,
few seconds with the cat, because we are told the neck has got a lot of nociceptors. So when you do the cut, immediately after the cut, the animal will be in pain for a few seconds. Is that what you're saying?
if pain is associated with the cut, it
Yeah.
will feel it. But within 10 seconds, if the blood is gushing and of a typical kosher or halal slaughter, the blood is gushing, that immediate loss of blood pressure immediately brings the cerebral cortex into a state of unconsciousness. And then there's a whole bunch of things that are happening which we know about and measure, but they're already after unconsciousness.
Yeah. Is there any recommendation, Prof, that you've got? Maybe the way the neck should be cut, should it be cut lower, up, higher a little bit? Should it be kept open after cutting? What would you suggest?
Um, The data seems to say that as long as you get the good cut,
Yeah.
the people who've done this work, and there are about 5 papers, and there's at least one more in press, all 25 papers, have not focused on exactly where the cut.
The
They're
location of.
assuming the cut is all 4 pipes are cut. So you've got a complete breakdown in the pressure system going to the head.
Yeah.
And that and one of the writers and raises another interesting point is that with the loss of blood pressure, there's also air becomes incorporated so that even if some blood goes in through the back of the neck, it may have air droplets in it, which will cause embolisms, which will also actually speed up death. So again, we need to keep unconsciousness and loss of pain separate from brainstem death and a brain-based definition of death. And that's what has been very sloppy. And all of these other indicators, the electroencephalographs and all of that stuff, one has to be very careful as to what exactly is each of those measuring in terms of a brain that's not a yes-no brain. In many ways, the animal people have treated the brain as a single black box, which is either working or not working. And that's intellectually, we know now wrong, because we know that different things happen in different parts of the brain. And that's what the human physiology people have brought to the table by taking the time to look at animal issues and go through the animal literature to see that it is inconsistent or misinterpreted as based on what has now been developed for human doctoral, the science that is now out there that deals with humans, which is ahead of where the science is as a whole for the animals. And that's the exciting breakthrough, is this business that the cerebral cortex is where pain is processed, and that is one of the first things to go offline when you have the rapid blood pressure. And the hemodynamic study shows that you really get that loss of pressure in the brain, even in cattle with the back system. That does not, it makes it a little longer. I mean, it's not zero. Sheep and goats will go unconscious probably a little bit faster, but we're talking about in the neighborhood of 0 to 10 seconds, and all this nonsense about minute and 2 minutes and stuff, that's very much related to the brainstem, but has nothing to do with animal welfare.
I was thinking of sleeping early today, but because of what you said, I'm gonna read a lot about the brain tonight.
I think I've
So,
sent on our mailing list, which you're on, you've
yeah,
got a number of papers that are
super.
hard to read. I've struggled with them to
Yeah,
really understand what we're saying.
yeah. So with these findings, how do you see the future in the next 10 years? Would you want other researchers to read these papers and switch from stunning to non-stun, or in your mind, it's just for the religious community?
I think if in the next 10 years, we've got enough to get the improvements I would like to see in the halal community and to get people to understand that it's an alternative. Now, generally speaking, and even when I talk about a high-speed line with multiple slaughter, it is slower. From an industrial point of view, there is absolutely no purpose in going to a slow system if the high-speed system. I'm not criticizing stun slaughter.
No, I like that.
I,
I like the fact that you are not in
I,
criticism.
I,
And I always tell
I'm
people,
not asking anybody else to switch. All I'm asking is that people, both in the science community, in the meat and food industry, and eventually beyond. Right now, my emphasis is to go out there and talk to the people, the scientists who work in this field but are not experts, the people in the industry, that there is no reason to have a negative feeling about religious slaughter. It is a perfectly humane slaughter. It's different, but it is not less. And that this sort of picking on religious slaughter is really a political religious issue and not an animal welfare issue. And if we can get people in the industry to understand that this is good animal welfare and is a perfectly appropriate, it is more expensive, it is slower, we're not promoting it beyond, but for those in the religious communities who want to observe their faith in the traditional way, and again, there are those who accept post-slaughter stunning in the Jewish community. I'm not telling anybody who accepts stunning in the Muslim community, stop, you've got to stop. If you're comfortable with it, if your religious leaders are comfortable with it, that's fine. It cuts the costs down. This is costly. This has expenses, but if it's done properly, taking advantage of what we're talking about, then let us do our thing, you do your thing, and leave us alone to do things properly. Check on us that we're doing it properly. That's perfectly legitimate. But don't tell us that what we're doing is wrong, it's cruel, it's inappropriate. It's fine. It's okay.
Okay, Prof, look, this conversation is a conversation many people will listen to. I'm sure they will bombard. I'm going to leave your email there. People are going to bombard you with a lot of questions. And I'm sure you are happy for anybody to get in touch.
I'm looking forward to talking to people who want to be reasonable about it.
Yeah, who wants to be? Yeah. Look, this conversation is good to have a dialogue, have a very frank discussions, and be respectful to each other. Whether you are on this side or that side, we have to be respectful.
Definitely.
Yeah. So, Prof, look, I thank you very much, and you have taken your time to come on this podcast. If we need any clarification, I'll invite you again to see if you can come in.
Wonderful. And let's stay in touch.
Yeah.